Welcome to another deep dive.
Yes, hello.
Today, we'll be exploring some fascinating material that you, our listeners, have shared with us.
Sounds intriguing already. What do we got?
This time, we're delving into Dion Fortune's The Mystical Qabala.
A classic. I'm excited to see what insights we can uncover.
Our mission, if you choose to accept it, is to understand the core of this ancient tradition.
Without getting lost in the denser details, right?
Precisely. We aim to make these complex ideas accessible and engaging. So let's get right to it. Today's deep dive will uncover the essence of the Mystical Qabala as presented by Dion Fortune.
Sounds like a plan. Where should we start?
Well, first, we'll explore its origins and what it's all about. Then we'll discuss why it's particularly relevant to Western seekers like you.
Right, because there's this idea that the Kabbalah resonates particularly well with the Western mindset.
Exactly. And then we'll delve into its unique way of thinking. And of course, no deep dive into Kabbalah would be complete without exploring the Tree of Life.
Ah, yes. The iconic Tree of Life, with its Sephiroth, paths, and all those intriguing connections.
We'll explore its structure and symbolism, and even touch upon what happens when things get a little, well, out of whack.
You mean the Kufath, the shadow side of the tree?
That's the one. Get ready for some aha moments that might just shift your perspective.
I'm all ears.
Let's start with a common misconception that Dion Fortune addresses right off the bat. The idea that the modern Kabbalah is simply a medieval forgery.
Ah, yes, that old argument. I'm curious to hear your take on it.
She contends that the Kabbalah we know today is actually a genuine descendant and natural development of much older pre-Christian Jewish teachings.
So, not a fake, but rather an evolving tradition with deep roots.
Precisely. And she uses this fantastic analogy of a river to explain this idea.
Okay, I like where this is going. Tell me more about this river analogy.
The closer you are to the source of a river, the purer the water, right? To grasp those fundamental principles, you need to look back to the origins.
Makes sense. But rivers also change as they flow, don't they?
Exactly. As a river flows, it's joined by other streams, and these aren't necessarily pollutants. If they're compatible with the main current, they actually enrich and strengthen the river.
So traditions can grow and evolve by absorbing compatible ideas from other sources.
Precisely. She argues that a faith that never changes, that resists any new influx, is essentially a dead one.
That's a powerful image. And it really highlights the dynamism inherent in living traditions.
It does, doesn't it? And this idea of absorbing and integrating is crucial to understanding the development of the Kabbalah.
Right, and this brings us to the role of secret societies and oral tradition, something Fortune emphasizes quite a bit.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Imagine entire systems of knowledge about the cosmos and the human psyche encoded in symbolic diagrams.
You mean those glyphs, those intricate designs we see in Kabbalistic texts?
Exactly. These glyphs weren't meant for mass consumption. They were passed down through generations of initiates, with the deeper meanings conveyed orally from teacher to student.
So these glyphs weren't just pretty pictures to look at. They were imbued with layers of meaning.
Absolutely. And the oral transmission ensured that those meanings were truly grasped and internalized.
Makes sense. It wasn't about memorizing information, but about a deeper understanding transmitted through direct experience.
Fortune even suggests that even today, meditating on these sacred symbols can unlock those accumulated insights.
So you're saying that engaging with these glyphs, even without direct oral transmission, can still awaken something within us.
It's as if the symbols themselves hold a key, a kind of vibrational resonance with the knowledge they represent.
That's pretty remarkable. And it makes you wonder why the Kabbalah wasn't written down in a more comprehensive way earlier on.
That's another intriguing point that Fortune addresses. She attributes the delay in recording Kabbalistic teachings in writing to the powerful influence of the Church.
Ah, yes. The Church was pretty dominant in Europe for centuries.
Precisely. And any alternative spiritual path likely would have been seen as a threat and actively suppressed. Keeping these teachings within closed groups and transmitting them orally was a way to safeguard them.
It makes you appreciate the lengths people went to preserve this knowledge.
Now, shifting gears a bit, Fortune makes a rather bold statement that might raise some eyebrows for a modern reader.
Oh, do tell. What's this controversial statement?
She specifically recommends the Western Kabbalistic system for the white races. It's a statement that needs unpacking, definitely.
Oh, wow. Yes, definitely something that needs careful consideration. What's the reasoning behind that assertion?
Keep in mind, she was writing in a different time with different cultural perspective, but her argument, at least within the context of her time, centers on the idea that the Western Kabbalah resonates more closely with the psychic makeup of, well, those of European descent.
She's suggesting it's a better fit for their specific energetic constitution.
That's the gist of it. She argues that it tends to yield faster results for them. And when practiced correctly, under proper guidance, it can enhance vitality without causing mental or physical imbalances.
And she implies that other systems, perhaps those from Eastern traditions, might not be as suitable for Westerners.
Yes, she expresses some concern about the potential for imbalance if Westerners adopt Eastern practices without the appropriate preparation or support.
I suppose it highlights the complexities of transplanting spiritual practices across vastly different cultural contexts.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that what works well in one culture might not be a perfect fit in another.
And she really stresses the importance of committing fully to one path, doesn't she? Mastering one system before dabbling in others.
Absolutely. She uses a helpful comparison to exercise. Each system works different muscles of your being. Jumping from one to another means you never develop true strength in any one area.
Like trying to learn every instrument in an orchestra at once, instead of focusing on mastering one first.
Precisely. And it's only after establishing that solid foundation in one system that you can then begin to explore other approaches meaningfully.
So you might create a more personalized, integrated practice later on, but the foundation is key.
Exactly. Now, for a spiritual system to be truly effective for Westerners, Fortune lays out some specific requirements.
Okay, I'm curious to hear what criteria she considers essential.
First, she says that the basic concepts need to be relatively easy to grasp, even for those who aren't naturally drawn to mystical ideas. It shouldn't be overly esoteric or inaccessible.
Makes sense. You need a clear entry point, especially for those just starting their journey.
Second, the energies engaged for spiritual development need to be potent enough to, as she puts it, penetrate the dense vehicles of the average Westerner.
So strong enough to cut through the perhaps less psychically attuned nature of, well, the average person.
That's the idea. And third, the system needs to be adaptable to shorter periods of study, given the demands of modern Western life.
Right, people have jobs, families, commitments. They can't necessarily spend hours every day in deep meditation.
Exactly. And the techniques should allow for quick focus and release of mental and emotional tensions. Constantly maintaining those heightened spiritual states just isn't practical in a fast-paced world.
So it needs to be efficient and effective for people living busy lives.
And according to Fortune, it's the Kabbalah that ticks all those boxes, providing a strong foundation before exploring other traditions, even pagan ones.
Okay, but what makes the Kabbalah such an ideal starting point in her view?
She highlights its underlying monotheistic structure as a primary reason. The Kabbalah, unlike some pagan systems, views all spiritual forces as aspects of a single ultimate God.
So it provides a framework of unity and order, which is essential when working with powerful forces.
Exactly. And she finds the Kabbalah's presentation of those ideas, particularly as visualized in the Tree of Life, remarkably clear and logical, making it well-suited for meditations that elevate consciousness.
This is why she calls the Kabbalah the yoga of the West, isn't it? It's a Western path for achieving similar spiritual goals.
That's it, precisely. Now that we have a sense of what the Kabbalah is and why it might be relevant to us, how do we approach studying it?
That's a great question. It seems like it requires a different mindset than, say, studying science.
You're spot on. Fortune contrasts the student of Kabbalah with the student of natural science. The scientist builds up understanding through observation and experimentation.
Gathering data, forming hypotheses, testing them in the real world.
Exactly, but the Kabbalist starts by analyzing abstract concepts.
So it's more of a top-down approach.
Yeah.
Starting with universal principles and then seeing how they manifest in the world.
That's the key difference. However, she acknowledges that those abstract concepts had to come from somewhere originally.
Which leads to the traditional view of those very first Kabbalists.
Right, you got it. They weren't scholars poring over ancient texts, but angels, beings from another realm entirely who gifted the Kabbalah to humanity.
So it's a divine revelation story, a kind of mystical origin myth.
Precisely. And then she draws this fascinating parallel to the individual soul.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this connection to the soul.
Just as the universe is governed by God, our own inner world, complex as it is, also needs guidance, its own God.
You're talking about the higher self, right? That spark of the divine within each of us.
That's it. And without that inner guidance, we end up with chaotic, unbalanced forces within us.
She compares it to the rule of the kings of Edom, if I recall correctly.
You've got a good memory. It's a Kabbalistic concept representing fragmented, disordered power.
So the inner work of the Kabbalah is about aligning ourselves with that inner divinity, establishing harmony within.
It's about bringing order to the internal chaos, just as God brings order to the universe.
Now, Fortune herself seems to take a pretty down-to-earth approach to all this, doesn't she?
She does. While she respects tradition, her focus is on what's practically useful, what actually works. She famously said that she doesn't care one jot for the authority of tradition if it hampers the free development of a system of such practical value as the Holy Kabbalah.
So she's willing to question established interpretations if they don't hold up in practice.
Exactly. She sees the work of previous Kabbalists as a resource, a quarry of ideas to draw from, not dogma to be blindly followed.
Makes sense. It's about using the wisdom of the past to illuminate the present and the future.
And her goal isn't to write a definitive history of ancient Kabbalah, but rather to present it as a living, breathing system for spiritual growth in the modern world.
The yoga of the West, as she keeps reminding us.
Exactly. And she's quite open about her own scholarly limitations. She admits to little Latin and less Greek, and her knowledge of Hebrew is mainly focused on gematria.
Gematria. That's the system of assigning numerical values to letters, right?
That's it. She's not presenting herself as a master linguist, but rather as someone who has deeply engaged with the Kabbalah on a practical level.
And that's where her real authority comes from. Her experience, not just her academic credentials.
Precisely. And here's something encouraging for anyone interested in exploring the Kabbalah. Fortune emphasizes that you don't need to be a Hebrew scholar to benefit from it.
So no need to spend years learning the intricacies of ancient languages.
Not necessarily. Being able to read and write the Hebrew characters is sufficient. While much of the modern Kabbalah is presented in English, its core words of power are in Hebrew.
So it's about connecting with the energetic vibration of those words, even if you don't fully understand their literal meaning.
Exactly. And gematria, with its numerical correspondences, helps to unlock those deeper layers of meaning, revealing hidden connections between different concepts.
Okay, so we've covered the origins, the relevance for Westerners, and the basic approach. Now let's dive into the heart of the Kabbalah, the Tree of Life. How does this symbolic map of creation work?
The foundational text, the Sefer Yetzirah, lays out the basic structure. There are 10 Sephiroth, which are the emanations or expressions of the divine, and they are connected by 22 paths.
Think of the Sephiroth as key points of energy, and the paths as the channels connecting them. It's like a cosmic circuit board.
That's a great analogy. And these 22 paths are linked to the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet.
And also to the 22 major arcana cards of the tarot, the trumps, or Atu.
Exactly. It's all beautifully interconnected. Now, when it comes to the tarot connections, there seems to be some disagreement among modern tarot scholars.
Right, you mentioned Pappas, Waite, and the Mathers-Crowley system earlier. Different ways of mapping the same territory.
Precisely. Fortune acknowledges these variations, but she ultimately aligns with the Mathers-Crowley system. Her criterion is how well a system fits onto the existing structure of the Tree of Life with all its complex correspondences.
So it's about finding the most harmonious fit, the system that integrates most seamlessly with the overall Kabbalistic framework.
Exactly. Now, each Sephira isn't just a dot on the diagram. It's a multi-layered entity with different aspects.
Okay, break it down for us. What are the key components of a Sephira according to Fortune?
She outlines 4 key elements. First, there's the mundane chakra, its astrological association. For example, Jupiter is linked to cheese.
Right, like a planetary energy influencing that particular Sephira.
Second, there's an angelic host representing different orders of spiritual beings associated with that Sephira.
So each Sephira has its own angelic entourage, so to speak.
Third, there's an archangelic consciousness, which he calls a throne, a kind of ruling intelligence for that sphere.
Okay, and fourth, what's the final element?
A specific aspect of the deity, although God in his entirety remains beyond our direct grasp.
Hidden behind those veils of negative existence, right? We're getting to those soon, I hope.
We are. But first, Fortune makes an important distinction between the Sephiroth themselves and the paths that connect them.
Okay, I'm ready for this distinction. How do their roles differ?
She sees the Sephiroth as macrocosmic, representing the divine emanations, those stages of creation unfolding from the ultimate source.
often visualized as a cascading flow of energy, like a lightning bolt connecting the Sephiroth.
Exactly. But the paths are more microcosmic, representing the unfolding of cosmic realization within human consciousness, our journey towards enlightenment.
Ah, so the paths are about our individual process of understanding and embodying those divine energies.
Precisely. They're often symbolized by the serpent Nekushtan, an emblem of wisdom and initiation.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, given that some might consider this knowledge secret, Fortune addresses the potential criticism of revealing it, doesn't she?
She does. She anticipates the accusations of betraying sacred teachings.
I can imagine some people being upset about that.
Her defense is that she's not divulging anything truly hidden. She's simply compiling information that's already been made public in various esoteric circles.
So she's gathering what's already out there, making it more accessible.
Precisely. She even mentions how much material was published by prominent figures like Mathers and Westcott.
She's not exactly revealing state secrets then.
And she makes this humorous jab, referencing Crowley's remark about the secret of the Hebrew alphabet, which isn't really a secret at all.
Right, everyone knows the Hebrew alphabet exists.
Ultimately, she argues that any original ownership of these ideas likely resides with the archangel Metatron, not with later human commentators.
So she's acknowledging a higher source of this wisdom.
Exactly. And she situates the Kabbalah within a broader esoteric context, emphasizing its connection to other traditions.
It's not just an isolated system then.
She compares it to the core of Western esoteric thought, even suggesting it could be considered the Christian gnosis, fulfilling a need for mystical depth within Western religion.
So it's a bridge between different spiritual approaches, offering a way to deepen understanding.
Now let's get to those mysterious veils of negative existence at the very beginning of the tree. What are they all about?
I'm ready to unveil the veils. What's behind them?
It's not that there's nothing beyond them. It's more about the limitations of our human minds as we currently experience reality.
So they represent boundaries of perception, the limits of what we can currently grasp.
Exactly. And those boundaries appear at different points depending on our level of understanding.
So someone with a basic understanding of the divine might encounter the veils sooner than someone with a more nuanced understanding.
Precisely. And she uses these different examples. The average person might get stuck at a simple image or concept. The scientist at the limits of what can be measured and defined as ether. The philosopher at the concept of the absolute. But the initiate, trained in symbolic thinking.
The initiate can push further, using the tools of the Kabbalah to navigate those realms beyond the veils.
Precisely. Fortune emphasizes that the Tree of Life isn't just about memorizing information, but about using it as a tool to expand our consciousness.
It's a method for exploring those deeper realms of being.
And she suggests that drawing the veils, paradoxically, helps us see further into the nature of origins. It's like focusing your eyes in the dark by looking slightly to the side.
That's an interesting analogy. So the veils provide a kind of contrast, a backdrop against which we can discern the first cause.
Exactly. Now let's talk about Kether, that first sephira at the very top of the tree. What's its essence?
It's the crown, the beginning, the source. I'm eager to hear how Fortune describes it.
Kether, whose primary god name is Ihia, meaning I will be, represents pure potentiality. It's the source of all things, but itself not active.
So it's all possibility, all potential, not yet manifest.
Precisely. And the veils, in this context, serve as a kind of intellectual scaffolding, allowing us to perceive what they frame.
Like a structure that helps us orient ourselves in this otherwise inconceivable realm.
Fortune also highlights the esotericist perspective on the unknown. They don't assume it's inherently unknowable.
So there's always the possibility of greater understanding as we evolve.
Exactly. Future stages of cosmic evolution might bring greater comprehension. And then there's the power of symbols. They act as seeds of thought, conveying profound truths to those who can understand them.
Even if we can't silly grasp their ultimate reality, they point us in the right direction.
Precisely. She gives examples like God is pressure and Kether is the Malkuth of negative existence, phrases packed with meaning for those who can unpack them.
So it's not about literal interpretations, but about delving into the deeper layers of meaning.
Now, shifting from the unmanifest to the first stirrings of creation, we encounter the concept of emanations and the Sephiroth.
Okay, let's explore how creation unfolds from that initial point of pure potentiality.
Fortune points out that exoteric Judaism, in its more literal interpretations, doesn't really have the concept of emanations. They see creation as a more step-by-step process.
A divine craftsman building the universe brick by brick, so to speak.
That's the image. But the Kabbalah sees it differently. The Sephiroth emanate from each other like overflowing pools.
So each Sephira arises from the one before it, carrying something of its essence, but also expressing something new.
Exactly. And she uses this fantastic analogy from Mathers, describing each Sephir as containing the potential of all that follows.
Like an acorn holding the blueprint for the entire oak tree.
Precisely. Kether contains the potential of all the other Sephiroth, Chokmah the potential of the following 8, and so on.
So each Sephira is a kind of seed, containing the blueprint for everything that emerges from it.
But as each Sephira manifests, it expresses only one specific aspect of that potential in its purest form. The other aspects remain latent.
So it's a process of differentiation, of unfolding the many from the one.
Precisely. Now imagine Kether as this overflowing fountain. Its energy flows into the next Sephira, Chokmah, and so on, cascading down the tree.
So the unmanifest source flows under a kind of cosmic pressure, constantly creating, evolving.
Exactly. As the process continues, all possible combinations occur, leading to increasingly complex structures.
It's like building with Lego blocks. You start with simple units, and then you can create incredibly elaborate structures by combining them in different ways.
That's a great way to visualize it. Each stage builds upon the one before it, leading to greater complexity and diversity. Now, let's move to Bina, the third Sephira, the superior mother.
Ah, Bina, the feminine principle of creation. I'm curious to explore her different aspects.
She has these two sides, Amma, the dark sterile mother, and Emma, the bright fertile mother.
Okay, so two seemingly opposite aspects, but both essential to her nature.
Exactly. She's also known as the Great Sea, Mara, which connects to the name Mary.
So she embodies that archetypal mother figure, first virginal, then giving birth through a kind of spiritual impregnation.
Precisely. And Bina is seen as the fundamental basis of all form. Think of it as the principle of stability, where interacting forces come into equilibrium.
Like the electrons in an atom forming a stable structure.
A perfect example. But she also gives more tangible examples, like social organizations that have become resistant to change, stuck in old patterns.
So Bina can represent both the stability of the atom and the stagnation of outdated systems.
It's all about the context. And she connects Bina to Kronos, Father Time, and the planet Saturn, emphasizing those themes of age, stability, and the weight of time.
So she's not all about dynamism and creation. There's an element of restriction and limitation, too.
And that's her role in relation to Chokmah, the Sephira of pure force and wisdom. She's the death to Chokmah's unbridled activity.
So she's the one who brings form and structure to the boundless energy of Chokmah.
Exactly. She channels that energy into the discipline of form, making her the head of the pillar of severity. She also connects Bina's emanation to the first cosmic night, the Pralaya, a period of rest after initial dynamism.
So it's a cyclical process, first expansion, then contraction, a kind of cosmic breath.
Precisely. And she notes that in a cyclical universe, there's a constant interplay between those two forces. Chokmah's dynamism and Bina's stability. Now, even though Bina is a supernal, one of the highest Sephiroth, she has a connection down to Malkuth, the material world.
Interesting. So the highest realms are linked to the lowest.
Absolutely. She's seen as the primordial root of matter, finding its complete expression in Malkuth. The Yetzirah even states that Malkuth sitteth upon the throne of Bina.
So the material world is ultimately grounded in that principle of form and stability represented by Bina.
Precisely. And this interconnectedness makes it tricky to rigidly assign deities from different pantheons to specific Sephiroth. A goddess like Isis, for example, appears in multiple Sephiroth because she embodies those principles on different levels of reality.
So it's not about one-to-one correspondences, but about understanding the underlying principles at work.
Exactly. Now, Fortune brings up the concept of faith in relation to Bina, which might seem unexpected at first glance. How does understanding form relate to belief?
Good question. I wouldn't immediately connect those two concepts.
She sees the roots of faith in Bina as understanding, the principle that synthesizes information into coherent patterns. Just as physical substance has structure, so too does consciousness.
So faith isn't just blind belief, but a way of structuring our understanding of the world.
Precisely. And this aspect of mental structuring is further developed in Hod, which we'll get to later. But she emphasizes that the roots of Bina are found in Amen, a title of Kether.
So even this principle of form ultimately originates in the unmanifest source.
Exactly. It's all interconnected. She also mentions the Yetziradic text associated with cheesed, which speaks of spiritual forces emanating from Kether, further illustrating that chain of origination. Now, she clarifies that Bina's presence in both Kether and Chokmah is after another manner.
What does she mean by that? How is Bina different in those higher realms?
Kether, as the ultimate source, contains the potential for both force, which becomes Chokmah, and form, which becomes Bina. It's like having both positive and negative poles within a single entity.
So it's all there in Kether, but in a completely undifferentiated state.
Precisely. And she reminds us that the Sephiroth are not things, but states of being, and all manifested things exist within those states in various combinations.
That's why it's so important to understand the correspondences, to see how these principles interact and manifest in different ways.
Exactly. Now, Fortune describes Bina as the sanctifying intelligence, drawing a parallel to the Virgin Mary.
Interesting comparison. What's the connection there?
The Virgin Mary brought forth the divine while remaining in her virgin state. Similarly, Bina represents that primordial substance that gives rise to all manifestation, but remains untouched, pure.
So she's the ever-virgin root substance, the ground of being from which all forms arise.
Precisely. She's the underlying formative influence, the tendency for lines of force to come together and create stable structures.
And then she delves into Chokmah and Bina, representing the masculine and feminine principles in creation, linking it to the idea of phallicism.
Yes, and she's careful to clarify that it's not about literal orgies or promoting sexual indulgence. It's about understanding a fundamental principle.
Okay, so what's the principle she's trying to convey?
It's about the dynamic force, the masculine principle, stimulating the inert substance, the feminine principle. And this applies on all levels of creation, not just the physical.
So it's about the interplay of those two fundamental forces, the spark of creation.
Exactly. And she emphasizes that this understanding doesn't lead to impurity. It's about balance, not indulgence or suppression.
Right, because both extremes can be problematic.
Impurity for her is about a loss of control, allowing those forces to run rampant. The mysteries teach balance, recognizing that spirit and matter are different expressions of the same reality.
So it's not about denying of the physical, but about integrating it with the spiritual.
Precisely. True purity is about keeping all forces in their proper place, functioning harmoniously. She even connects this to Freudian psychology, suggesting it sheds light on this concept of phallicism.
Interesting. So modern psychology can offer insights into these ancient teachings.
She argues that repressed or dissociated sexual feelings can hinder our ability to engage fully with life on all levels, including the spiritual.
So it's about acknowledging those energies, not suppressing them.
Exactly. And this is crucial for magical work, which requires a strong and directed will. Now, concerning Bina, she mentions the virtue of silence and the vice of avarice, linking them to Saturn.
Okay, I'm curious about that connection. How does Saturn relate to those concepts?
Gray-haired Saturn, silent as a stone, captures that primordial stillness and weight associated with Bina. Silence, in this context, is about inner contemplation, receptivity.
And avarice, how does that fit in?
Avarice is about clinging, hoarding, a negative expression of that desire for stability and form. It's Saturn's energy turned inward, becoming stagnant.
So it's about finding that balance between structure and flow, stability and generosity.
Precisely. And she connects the 4 threes of the tarot to Bina.
Representing the initial manifestation of equilibrium, of opposing forces coming into balance.
Exactly. The triangle itself, the simplest solid form, is a symbol of both Saturn, representing dense matter, and the triangle of art used in magical evocations.
So Bina is that foundational structure upon which all manifestation rests.
Now, let's move down the tree to cheesed, the 4th Saphira, often translated as mercy.
Okay, mercy. What's its position and significance within the overall system?
Cheesed is at the heart of the pillar of mercy, the right-hand pillar of the tree. Its magical image is that of a powerful king, crowned and throned.
So it embodies benevolent authority, a wise and compassionate ruler.
Exactly, and the Yetziradic text calls it the cohesive or receptive intelligence, containing all the holy powers.
So it's a vessel, a container for those divine energies from which further emanations proceed.
Precisely. And Fortune connects cheese to the solidification of abstract ideas that originate in the logoidal consciousness, the divine mind.
So it's the stage where those archetypal ideas begin to take on more concrete forms.
And she notes that symbols become more accessible as we move down the tree, closer to our human experience.
Makes sense. The higher realms are more abstract, harder to grasp.
Now, how does that image of the throned king speak to us? What does it represent in human terms?
Well, it evokes stability, peace, justice, a ruler who cares for his people, laws that are both ordered and compassionate.
It's that ideal of benevolent leadership, guided by wisdom and love.
And the titles associated with cheese reinforce those qualities, majesty and love.
Even the angelic beings, the Casmalium, the brilliant ones, add to this sense of royal splendor. And Gedula, meaning greatness, is another name for cheese.
So it's not just about mercy, but about a kind of expansive generosity, a magnanimity of spirit.
Precisely. And its astrological connection is Jupiter, known for its beneficence and good fortune. The spiritual experience linked to cheese is the vision of love.
Okay, so we've got love, abundance, generosity, all those positive qualities.
Yeah.
Now, what about its counterpart on the other side of the tree?
Directly across from cheese on the pillar of severity, we find Gebera, often described as strength and severity.
Ah, Gebra, the warrior principle. I'm ready to explore this one.
Its magical image is a mighty warrior in his chariot, prepared for battle. Quite a contrast to the serene king of cheese.
Definitely. It embodies a more active, dynamic, even confrontational energy.
Exactly. But Fortune clarifies that Gebra isn't a destructive enemy, but rather a protective warrior king, ensuring justice and upholding what's right.
So it's a necessary force, a kind of cosmic policeman maintaining order.
Precisely. While cheese inspires love and devotion, Gebra commands respect, even a healthy dose of awe. She argues that this element of fear of the Lord is actually crucial for a deeper and more enduring love.
So it's not about being afraid, but about recognizing the power and authority of the divine.
Exactly. Gebra provides that necessary edge.